But you do have to consider if it's right for you. Do you want to spend $100 for 5 years? The answer is yes. I would have gotten a lot of heat from that heating pad as I fried out the circuits. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. This is that retired guy who's lived through the 60s twice and is still having fun and still traveling. Now you regular viewers will remember that in my last travel video I covered tips on packing for your trip, but it was just a domestic trip. It was a little R&R in Hilton Head Island. So what I did was delete the international items from my packing list since we were staying in the good old USA. Recently though, we went out of the country with the winos, our partners in crime, where we generally travel to either a winemaking region or a hub of the region, or maybe just a place where they sell wine in restaurants. That was what we did this time as we went to Budapest. Now Hungary really isn't known for its wines, but we had a lot of good samplings, we had a lot of good wine with dinner, and it turns out that Budapest, Hungary itself, can be really lovely, whether you're seeing it during the day or at night. Now we also stopped in Munich on our way to Budapest. I needed some new lederhosen. My old pair was about 15 years old and pretty much had given up the ghost. So we did some good shopping and I found what I needed. But that day at lunch we were in a beer garden, and one group of our table mates were talking about how they'd seen Adele the night before, who was in town, and another group was talking about how they were going to see her that night. We looked at each other and we said, why not? So we went to a secondhand ticket site online, got a couple of tickets, and joined 80,000 of our closest friends and saw Adele. That was quite a show. She does put on a good one. And that goes to show that no matter what, you never know what's going to happen when you're out traveling. So when packing and preparing to travel internationally, there are some things that you'll want and there are some things that you'll absolutely need. Ignoring them can ruin, absolutely ruin your trip. Let's say we go over them one by one. Now, first and most important is the passport. One thing people don't think about is that if you're going to Europe, in fact, most places around the world, they want your passport expiration date to be at least 6 months after your last date of travel. If it's within that time, your passport's still good, but you can be denied boarding onto the airplane right before you leave. Worse yet, you can be boarded and then be denied entry to the country once you get there. You might be able to get emergency documents there, but nothing's guaranteed. So you have to know the date of expiration on your passport and react accordingly. Now do yourself a favor. Go get your passport and take a look at it right now. If you've got less than a year of time left before your expiration date, go get it done. Remember, it can take 3 months or more, according to the State Department, to get a passport back. Sometimes it's sooner, but again, do you really want to bank on that? I mean, when Elton calls you and says, listen, I have this gala happening with the king, would you like to come over? You'll be ready to jump at a moment's notice. But more realistically, if a buddy wants to go skiing in the Alps or just hit some pubs over in Britain, be ready to do that. Check your date. You'll be glad you did. If you miss a date, and I've known people who got dinged on passport dates, it can bring you to tears. Don't let it happen to you. Another thing to consider is global entry, especially if you plan more international travel. Basically, global entry is TSA pre-check on steroids. With global entry, you get TSA pre-check automatically, meaning you can go to the shorter lines, you can keep your jacket and your belt on, your shoes on, and you don't have to take your liquids and computer out of your bag. But best of all, when you're coming back to the country, you don't have to stand in those lines. Have you ever seen those lines or been in them when you're waiting for customs? They can last an hour, 2 hours even. But with global entry, you go in, and what we did at O'Hare, we looked into a kiosk, we walked straight through, they handed us a couple of cards, and we were through to the luggage rack. And that, I would say, took us 2 minutes, if that. Sometimes you'll beat your luggage there, but it sure beats the alternative. But you do have to consider if it's right for you. Will you be traveling enough internationally? Do you want to spend $100 for 5 years? The answer is yes. To qualify, you do have to go down to the airport or to a designated location and take an interview with a customs agent. But when that happens and it's done and you get your approval, you are now a global entrant, you get your card, and you'll be flying through the lines on your way out and certainly flying through on your way back in. Another benefit is you can get one of these Snappy carrying cases for your documents. You can keep your passport in there, and also your global entry card will slide right in. And that keeps them together at the times you need them. It's not like you'll be using this that much, because when you're in the country, you really won't be carrying around these documents. You'll be using it more for when you're traveling out and then traveling back. But that covers your documents. Let's talk about some of the other things you're going to need and want when you're traveling overseas. Adapters are important. Now, if you're going to Europe, you're going to the land of different plugs and 240 volts rather than R120. Now, a lot of the hoity-toity hotels do have USB plugs, as well as, even in some of the nicer hotels, plugs that run on American current in the bathrooms. But that's few and far between, and you're really not going to run into it that much, and don't count on it. So make sure you check the voltage requirements before you go. Now, in the UK and Ireland, the prongs look like this. These 3 big ones, kind of massive, eh? And in the rest of Europe, they look like this, these 2 prongs. And remember, they both run on 240 volts. So with those prongs, you're going to need adapters to be able to plug in your equipment. Now, those prongs that I showed you are from adapters that we've had for some years. And this adapter, the one for Europe, was fine up to a point on our trip to Munich and Budapest. Now, when you think about it, really the things you're trying to plug in are your electronics. And so when you have your block that you plug in your USB to, that fits in just fine. But nowadays, people are using USB-C a lot more. That's not happening. And that's the wave of the future. So this became a little bit obsolete pretty quickly. So on our trip, we picked up this little sucker. It just plugs right in, and it's got USB and USB-C. This is something you could look for and buy off the internet before you go, and if you get caught short, you could buy it at any airport that you pass through. So that makes it pretty easy to solve a problem. Now, if you do want to bring your computer with, one thing, this adapter will be fine for that because, again, a normal US plug will go in there just fine. One last thing, don't forget about the 240 volt current. Now, I was going to bring a heating pad with me because I had a sore arm at the time, and then I caught myself. Duh. The electrical items will show you what kind of current they can handle. And you can clearly see here that this heating pad can only take up to the 120, not the 240 I was going to plug it into. Adapters do not change voltage. They only allow you to plug your device into the local current. I would have gotten a lot of heat from that heating pad as I fried out the circuits. But if you're going to bring a device like a hairdryer and it does not say this, you see the 240, then leave it home. And it's probably not worth it like we have to have a hairdryer from Europe and from the UK. But don't worry, your phone and your computer can handle the voltage over there. They're made to take both voltages. It's not a problem. Now let's talk travel insurance when you go out of the country. Now some things may be covered by your personal insurance, other things may be covered by your credit card plan. but many, if not most, are not. There are a lot of reasons to consider travel insurance. Let's go over them. First, delayed or lost luggage. Now, you could go to Paris or perhaps on a cruise or anywhere, but your luggage doesn't make it, and they don't know where it is and when it's going to show up. Now, you've got things in there that you need and need right away, and you're going to have to replace that quickly just to start and have a good time on your trip. So with the travel insurance, that'll ensure that you've got coverage and someone to assist. More severe is trip interruption. Now, in 2010, when we were living in Munich, we were on holiday in Spain when Eyjafjallajökull, the Iceland volcano, erupted. You probably heard about it in the news. Well, almost immediately, all flights throughout Europe, including Spain, of course, were grounded. Nothing moved for an entire week, and it took 4 more weeks for the flights to actually get up to speed again. Immediately, the trains filled up for a period of weeks, and the hotels were doing the same. Now, we were lucky. We had a rent-a-car, and we were able to negotiate our way back to driving that to Munich, and so we didn't need a flight. Now, there are horror stories about people that were stuck at that airport. They had no flights, they couldn't get a train, there were no hotels, there were no alternatives. We still don't know how so many of them made it home, much less made it through the next few days. So having travel insurance at least gives you coverage during that time, as well as someone to assist in whatever opportunities and alternatives that you may have. This is extreme, but extreme things can happen when you travel, either in the country or overseas, which magnifies the problem. Another benefit is cancel for no reason. We always tack this on. You could have an accident, sickness, a problem with a loved one right before you leave. We have elderly parents. It just gives us peace of mind knowing that you can cancel for any reason or no reason if you so choose, and you're covered. Finally, the most important reason for travel insurance is medical coverage. Be aware that your coverage here, your health care, will more than likely not cover you when you go out of the country. And you Medicare users, Medicare doesn't cover you when you leave the good old USA. Now, as an anecdote, about 10 years ago, I was changing jobs. There was a period of about 3 weeks when I wasn't going to be covered by either company's health insurance. Now, I could get the pricey Cobra or just sit it out. What could happen? We didn't hesitate, though. We got the coverage. And wouldn't you know it, about a week before I started the new job, I had my heart attack. Now, the first bill I got was $105,000, the first of many bills. And if I didn't have that coverage, that would have been on me, all of it. I'm fine, by the way. Thanks for asking. But when you think about it, thousands and thousands of people leave the country on holiday every day without travel insurance, meaning without medical coverage, going to countries where their access to a medical staff is unclear, the skill of that staff and the practices is unclear, and you're not covered for the cost. Think about what could happen. A mild stroke, a heart attack like mine, something as simple as stepping off a curb, turning and cracking an ankle, or shattering a knee. Anything that can happen could happen. And what if you had to be evacuated back home? The costs of all this could be staggering, and you'd have no support without that insurance. To me, that's the one major reason to consider travel insurance. All I'm saying is, when you think of all the reasons that you have health insurance here in the US, day in and day out, don't those apply overseas as well? So don't leave home without it. Now, the travel insurance I've used for a long time is AIG Travel Guard. It's easy to use and easy to set up. Now, travel insurance itself is not cheap, but it covers you when you need it the most. Okay, there's a couple more things to think about. Certainly not as pressing as medical coverage and the passport issue, but items that you really want to look into. The first one, cell phone coverage. Now, you'll have your phone with you, and you'll have some people, I'm sure, that you want to keep in touch with. Now, unless you're really off the beaten track, you will get a signal, you will have coverage, but the extent of that coverage is something you should try to check out before you go, especially in the area you're in. I was on a cruise once, and they said they had Wi-Fi, and it was great, and it turned out it wasn't. The internet cafe, so to speak, and the complaint department were busier than the bars on the ship because everybody who had brought their computers with to do some work wasn't able to get good coverage or had it dropping out. So checking that before you go can be difficult. One place you can look, though, is reviews on TripAdvisor or wherever to see what they thought of the internet, and you can get some pretty good information there. Also, your carrier will have roaming charges for wherever you go. We have AT&T, and it was $12 a day for the first line and $6 a day for the second line. So check into that, because those charges can come at the end if you haven't looked into it and be quite a shock. Now, if you look into it beforehand, it'll still be quite a shock, but at least it's not something you'll be surprised with when the vacation's all over. Now, the last thing is just a fun little side item, the temperature. Now, if you're going overseas, you'll be getting the temperature in Celsius. The rest of the world, except for 3 countries, is on the metric system. And those countries are Liberia, Myanmar, and the USA. Us forward-thinking countries, all 3 of us, must know something the rest of the world doesn't. Anyway, you'll be hearing the forecast and the temperature in Celsius. And why it's easy enough to check your phone, it's almost easier to calculate it over to Fahrenheit in your head. Now, the first time I saw the conversion calculation and heard about it, it kind of looked to me like this. Then when I found out what the calculation was, took a harder look at it, it looked like this. A whole lot simpler, but it's still a mouthful and something tough to do in your head. So do the same thing that all of us expats do. Times 2 plus 30. That's it. So when you see that it's 20 degrees, times 2 plus 30, that's 70 degrees. So 20 is the comfort zone. Above that, 25 is 80, and 30 is 90, and it goes the same way down. 15 is 60, 10 is 50, and so on. So when you see the number, times 2 plus 30, or the other way around going the other way, it's simple, it's easy, and you'll be thinking like a metric person in no time, and you'll know what the temperature is going to be the next day. So let's summarize a few of the things we talked about. Lost luggage, for example, can be awful, but it's fixable. Passport problems, on the other hand, may not be fixable in the time frame you need them to be, and in the wink of an eye, your vacation could be gone. And medical problems, should they occur, can have long-term ramifications if you're not prepared. It can be devastating. So make sure you think about these things and tick those boxes before you go. That way, you'll sleep easier and travel much more confidently and have a great time. So that's it for the video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, please give me a like. And feel free to share it with anybody you know that travels, which is, of course, everybody. And if you want to see what comes next, make sure you subscribe. That way we'll keep having fun together and you won't miss a thing. This is that retired guy who's lived through the 60s twice and is still traveling and still having fun. See you next time, folks.